Cole, how are you doing?
Good afternoon, Ross. Yes, everything's all right. Managing with the lockdown, obviously, but yes, it's we're all right. Coping well.
Coping well in Wales in the lockdown.
Yeah. And yourself?
Yeah, busy with work, mate. So passes the time, doesn't it?
Well, I often wonder now. Myself and Caroline's big into quilting and stuff like that, and I do the writing. What we'd have done, perhaps, if we weren't doing it at our age, obviously.
Yeah, I think hobbies are. I mean, it's definitely been good for me being able to do a bit of writing or a bit of tinkering with something that's written before. I don't think I'm popular in Cumbach with my parents, so I bought my father a 1,000-piece jigsaw of Ear and Santorini, and I think he's slowly driving him mad. He's accusing me of hiding pieces and everything now.
Is he?
Yeah.
That's one of Caroline's pet hates. She loves jigsaws, and she lends them out of when she has them back, like his piece is missing.
Yeah.
She hates it. She does.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm too popular up there at the moment, but there we go. So I'm just trying to keep him entertained, that's all.
Perhaps he wishes he was in Santorini. See, perhaps he should have done one, given one a Mountain Ash, like a 1,000-piece of Mountain Ash.
Yeah.
Be more at home, like.
Well, I think Mountain Ash is a 1,000-piece jigsaw. Right?
No, it's more than that, but.
More than that. But yeah, so we're back doing the poetry stuff.
Yep.
And this is our 12th podcast now.
Is it 12?
Yeah, it's the season 2 finale, if you like.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll call it the finale, I think, for a while. People are probably getting fed up of us, I don't know.
Probably going, it's those two boring gits.
I often wonder if we have encouraged people to write or this type of thing. I have no idea. I hope we have, like, you know what I mean? It's
probably put a few off.
That's right. I think Russ Garrett here put a few off.
He's like that. He's
with his book,
isn't he?
Yeah, with his book, you know what I mean. They've probably read it and it's got inside their heads, like, you know, said, like, you know, this isn't for me.
He's a bit like Marmite as a person as well, I think.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad I don't see him very often, to be honest with you.
Well, he's not here to defend himself, so
no. So we can slag him as much as we like.
Absolutely. So yeah, 12 in. I thought we'd Remembrance coming up.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd go to one of your passions, which is the war poetry. And I know you've written extensively about war. I've written a few, in a way, not as directly as you have. But I thought I might just spend a bit of time talking about, what was it about war poetry that really, got you and made you want to write it?
Well, as people know through the podcast, I was born in a mining village in Cairo. And the only poetry that sort of hit home to me when I was growing up was sort of things like Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall and that type of thing, you know what I mean? Nursery rhymes, that type of thing, which are a big part of our growing up, obviously. But they were more fun than anything. So until I went to the grammar school, poetry didn't really mean anything to me. Truth be told, but when we were doing our O-levels the year before, obviously David John came to the school as the English lit or English language teacher he was, and he was only young. He'd come from Canada, and he sort of introduced us to war poetry. The first way he introduced it was with a record, Universal Soldier, by Buffy St. Marie, and the Vietnam War, obviously. It was completely new to us. We thought, who's this teacher? What's he doing? Like playing records here? Like, I mean, but then when you dissected it, the questions were just sort of coming out, he'd ask you the question and people would answer it. They all have different answers, as you know, different perceptions of what the record is about. So, and then he introduced us to certainly Wilfred Owen, Sassoon, who were actually soldiers themselves. They were poets in their own right, very literary men who went to war in the First World War and detested the war, even though they were soldiers. Did their bit. However, they wrote then about the horrors of war. And Mr. John then would say, give us the poem, and it could be by any poet, a war poet. And then you just dissect it. And with that, then it basically give you the history of the First World War, the horror of it, and the people killed and the animals killed and what they went through in the trenches, shell shock, post-traumatic stress today, shell shock, firing squads, that type of stuff. And then obviously I did my O-levels, joined the police, and never did anything else again with poetry at all. Didn't interest me. When I say didn't interest me, I never had time, I was doing other things obviously. And then when I retired, and I saw the coal mining poem, and that's when I started writing poetry. Initially it was the mining poetry, then I thought, well, I'll do some more poetry. And then I got into the First World War, and I looked at battles and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And it just developed from there. So, I've done numerous war poems, and then people would ask me to write the war poem of their experiences, the tank regiment, I've done a few for the Royal Tank Regiment.
Yeah.
Prior to that, all I thought about tanks were, they were used in the World War, but when you look back at the First World War, when they were used first at Cambrai, I never knew that until a friend of mine up the Gulf from us, who's an ex-tanky, said, can you write a poem about the Battle of Cambrai? So I just researched it, I write the poem. Mm-hmm. And then, it goes on from there, basically.
Yeah, because to me, it's not something that I haven't read any war poetry sort of extensively. I've read, probably the main war poetry I've ever read has been yours. But it strikes me as an odd thing to be poetic about. It's you're right. The reality of it, the loss of life, and the it's a savage thing, isn't it? And so I find it quite strange. Because when you write something in a poem, then you are romanticizing it to a certain extent, and I think where the war poetry is different. We talk about music a lot and song lyrics, and I've heard lots of songs that are anti-war and pro-peace and all that sort of stuff. But war poetry, I can't think of many songs that sort of celebrate what people have done in a war, or deal with the tragedy of a war. So to me, it's an odd sort of correlation between the two. But I think when it's done well, it's very moving. I think it's a really good way of getting information across to people. But it's, I don't know. It's odd because I tend to write quite solemn and melancholy sort of things. So in many ways, I think that I would be kind of prone to that. But then maybe that is my age. Maybe because I haven't really had any contact with it as such. We've had wars in Iraq and that sort of stuff, but never been, I guess, part of generations then that have actually experienced it in certain ways. I know maybe your parents would have experienced it. I know my grandfather served. I know his brother served. My great grandmother would have lived through it. But we don't have that these days, and maybe there's an argument in it that a lot of the reasons why there's so much sort of civil unrest at the moment is because we have generations that have never felt the threat of, you know, having a unified force that's kind of against us in many ways. And so, and I think even when you look to kids, I think that thing of the boogeyman, that fear element is important, and it's quite a binding kind of thing for people. And you see it now, and you see it sort of, you know, after 9/11, you know, the world really did kind of band together around that. And we see it with, you know, certain terror attacks and things that are happening at the moment, that, you know, there's a binding of people, which is quite sad actually to think about it, because it's quite a horrible sort of incident. But we have many generations now, I think, that never felt that threat. And it may also be because the wars that have happened have been, you know, new fodder for the news. You know, I mean, I remember being young with the first Iraq War, and going and watching a war on the news. You know, and watching footage from missiles and things like that. And maybe that devalues the horror of it a little bit. Maybe we become desensitized to it a little bit. I don't know. It's like I said, it's somewhere where I've sort of in the writing, I've never really sort of gone there, outside of, you know, a few pieces. But yes, it's an interesting. Do you want to?
I think with that, you know, you've got to go back generations. Certainly, when I was growing up, when I was like 7, 8, 9, I used to play war games with my brothers and my friends. You'd be the Germans, I'd be the British, and you'd be there with your homemade sort of rifles and stuff, and you'd be pretending to shoot each other. Because obviously the war had finished in 45, so I'd have been like say 10, 9, 10, not really knowing anything about the war. Just sort of, it was Germans and British, that type of thing, you know what I mean? But I think it was because it was close to the war. I think generations now after that, in the 60s, 70s and 80s, I think the youngsters today, basically, I'm not saying they don't care about war, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they got an affinity with war. They'll see it on the telly, you know, something being bombed in Israel or wherever, and once the telly's off, that's it basically. They might say, oh, that's a terrible thing, but I don't think they actually know the reasons for it, or the people who are committing these atrocities, you know what I mean? Yeah. It was different in the Second World War and the First World War. It was the Germans, end of, and the Russians, this type of stuff. But today, now, there are so many things going on in the world, I think it's become the norm. You know, you look at the world map, I don't know how many wars are actually going on at the minute. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot. Do you want to read us one of your pieces?
I'll read you the. This is the first poem I wrote, a war poem, and it's sad, and it's shows the horror of war, and they've obviously made a play of it and a film. It's called War Horse.
Oh yeah.
Because, as you know, millions of horses were just taken to the front, and just they were killed and just left on the side of the road, basically, as cannon fodder. So I thought, when I wrote the first, I thought, yeah, I reckon about the war horse first, and this is it. War horse. I remember it well, as if yesterday. My master cried, but he had to obey. Uniformed men, they stole me that day. My future now destined, a land far away. Down to the port with thousands like me, winched on a ship, our fate history. We landed in France, not knowing our worth, paddocked together, no peace on earth. Shell blasts I hear far away in the distance, all new to me, the night sky it glistens. That is the night, Death hit home to me. A war horse my fate. That's how it would be. The following day, a task I was given, pulling a gun. It was so unforgiving. Mile after mile, slowly untiring, shells bursting overhead, brave men lay dying. Once at the front, harness undone, back down the line, a hero unsung. Fed and watered, I lay down to rest. A far foreign field would be my bequest. 4 years I toiled, carnage abounding, pulling the cannon, gunfire resounding. I lost many friends to gash and shell. Death commonplace, a vision of hell. Peace came at last, it had taken its toll. Horses and men, many lost souls. The stench of death, with me forever. Brave men on horse, in heaven together. We played our part in that abhorrent war, while enemy soldiers spilled each other's gore. I was taken by men to follow this course. Home I am now, a strong, proud war horse. So I did that one sort of through the eyes of a horse, obviously, a war horse. And it shows the horror of the war, the friendship between the soldier and the horse. However, they were just cannon fodder, basically. They were looked after, and they weren't looked after. So that was the first one I did.
I mean, there's some real. That's a powerful poem. I mean, some of the word choices are very confrontational. You know, you use the word gore, and some of the words in that are really confrontational. That's a lovely piece, mate. It's a lovely piece of writing.
Yeah, you know what I mean. It's one of my favorite. I do get a bit watered when I read it, like I do with a film like Aberfan, and you do get. And the thing about it with poetry, I don't know if you're the same, but you can get emotionally attached to them. It all depends what they're about. Now, Cambrai is totally different. It's about tanks, but this is about a living thing. It's like the soldiers I write about. One of my friends, I think his grandfather got killed in Gallipoli, and he didn't find his grave till recently, basically. So I wrote a poem about him. You know, you're talking about a living person. It's like when I do the like Tasker Watkins VC, the judge who served in the Second World War. To look at this man, and I had the great pleasure of giving evidence in front of him on many occasions when he was a judge. To look at this man, if you said he was a war hero, you'd say, what did he do then? Well, you need sight of stature, but when you research what he did, the man was, and when he was a judge, he was very, very fair. Because he said after the war, I did it. What I did. At the time, you know what I mean. But he was very, very fair. So you go from this war hero who's killed to a man in civilian life who's very, very fair with people, criminals perhaps. You know what I mean. Across the board, there was no sort of in between. He was a cracking bloke. And when you write about individuals, again, you get a little bit attached to them.
So that is I can see. It's a very emotional piece. Yeah, I could see that when you're reading it.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it is. That's a really nice piece of work, buddy. Really nice piece of work.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have you got one? Have you got?
Yeah, you kind of you mentioned a little bit actually. About the idea of playing army or soldiers in the playground, and when I wrote Fly Tipping, I was reminded one day I was out and I saw a stick on the ground, and it reminded me of when I was in junior school, which was in Our Lady of Lourdes, the Catholic school in Mountain Ash, and we had the church and we had the school, And there was a lovely big playground all the way around it. This is before they built the extension on it. And behind there was a field. And the field banked up to a hill at the top. There was an old oak tree. And we used to hide our sticks during class time behind there, because then we'd come out and we'd play with them, and that's what we would pretend to be soldiers. You know, you would stand up on the hill. There was normally 5 of us on the hill, and 5 on the bottom. We just run at each other and make noises. But yeah, even kids, of my generation were still playing war, in school. And I wrote a poem about it, and the poem's called Soldiers. And but it's much more about kids trying to emulate what war would have been like, or playing war in school. So I'll give you a reading of that.
Lovely.
Okay. We 5 were hillbound in a nameless war, conspiring atop a soggy esker, with skinny, sappy guns, crouched behind a single oak. The slope before us, and the enemy dug in a track away, in the sand pile at Field's Neb. Tactics understood, the push occurred, some never reaching the lush drift base, and our leaders pushing forward while the bodies stacked behind them. No rights or service for fallen allies, we left them where they fell, among ers and rats and lame piaus. Dramatic, prone, and always face up squinting. Some knees and elbows now pockmarked green, from procumbent shooting shapes and pose, the woody mortar doing its work. And some went hand to hand, rolling in the drifting sand, arguing throughout the skirmish on who shot who. As the bells knelled tussles to an end, we downed our arsenals and hid them behind trees until next break, when our guns would be cold and brown and ready. Their wet bark would be warmed in tiny hands again, and the dead restored once more.
Brilliant. Brilliant. You know what I mean? You go back to the First World War. That's brilliant, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's like you said, when you're growing up, and I've been there, like you say, and you can imagine it. I don't think kids of today will have that.
No, it's all Pokemon and.
Well, it is. It's all on the video now. But we used to go out, didn't we, down the field, up the forestry. Build the dens. This is the German den here. No man's land is over there, like this type of thing. But when you go back to the First World War, and when I do the poetry and I do a bit of research on it, we had young boys lying about their age. They wanted to go to war. They had no idea what was happening. We're going to fight the Germans, and it'll be over in a couple of months. How wrong they were. Lied about their age, like 14-year-old, 15-year-old boys saying they were 18, and they were signed on because the recruiting sergeant used to have money for signing them. So now and again he wouldn't give a monkey's about how old they were. Sign on the dotted line, boys, and off you go. And many young men were killed, who were perhaps. Well, they wouldn't be in the army today. Simple as that. They wouldn't be in the army today. And that was the futility of the First World War. It was going to be over in 6 months. 6 years later, was it? 5 years later. It takes 5 years, and all the millions of men and horses and every civilian casualties in that. Unbelievable.
I just I think about. When I think about that, and we studied it in school when I did GCSE history, we did the wars and European fascism and those sorts of things, and you sort of hear the stories of those volunteers, those young volunteers, the volunteer to go and do that, and you just think about what quality of people it takes, of character. The quality of character it takes to go and do that as a volunteer, and then obviously the tremendous loss of them, and obviously there was victory, and the Allies then were on the winning side on that. But the loss to society of millions, probably, of incredibly virtuous, patriotic, proud, dutiful people. I mean, that's a lot to take out of a society, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And war does that.
Mm.
War does, you know what I mean? I've just done a number of poems for the forgotten. You know, these are the soldiers who were executed as deserters, but they've since been pardoned. Not all of them, not the ones for rape and murder. They've never been pardoned, but I think there's 300 of them, or 200, 300 of them have been actually pardoned. Now, none of these names are on any monuments after the First World War, and it's very difficult to get the names put on them. I think everybody said, well, no, they're not being put on it, but there's a memorial up in the Midlands for them, like a memorial garden. And I've done a few poems, a fella's sending me the names, and I'm doing the poetry about them. But it's, the First World War especially was brutal, you know, thousands of lives for like 5 yards of land. Unbelievable, you know what I mean? Wouldn't happen today. Warfare is totally different today. You know, yeah, you have your casualties, but not like that.
No.
Not thousands upon thousands upon thousands. And that's how the wars have changed. But, you know, I go back to Wilfred Owen and Sassoon. These were men like us. They were writers. They were literary men who went to war for the same reasons that a 15-year-old went to war, basically, for your country. They're a little bit more switched on than a 15-year-old, obviously, because perhaps they knew what they were getting into. But I don't think even they knew the horrors of it until they were there. And that's when they wrote their poetry, obviously.
Yeah.
Even though they were fighting, like Wilfred Owen won the Military Cross, Sassoon was highly decorated. And I suppose when you know the hardened soldiers saw these men coming over and thinking, "Oh, he's a poet, he is. You know, he's going to be useless." Like they, you know, what you know, what's he going to? But they didn't. They served their country. Only thing is, they hated the war. And Sassoon, it did unhinge Sassoon. Wilfred Owen was a bit different because he died young. He did. He was only he was 25, Wilfred, when he got killed. So I thought, when I wrote and I started writing poetry, I thought, well, I got to write one about Wilfred Owen, you know, because obviously he started it off, probably, I would think, him and Mr. John. So this is Wilfred Edward Salter Owen. Lovely name, isn't it? Wilfred Edward Salter Owen. He was called to arms wielding rifle and pen. Erato his muse, as he bravely led men. In the heat of battle, he had his soul torn apart, shell-shocked, concussed, a war-weary heart. Home to recuperate, his life then transformed. War poems he wrote, literary life now reborn. Then back to the trenches, that medal he sought. To justify his poetry, he heroically fought. Ajonco attacking, enemy blood overflowed. Leading from the front, on him glory bestowed. The Military Cross for gallantry in the field. This literary man, his place in history now sealed. Promotion beckoned, a proud moment indeed. A poet come soldier, bravely taking the lead. With armistice nearing, his young life was taken, his prose at an end, tragically forsaken. Promotion it came, one day after his death, a telegram received, leaving his mother bereft. Church bells rang out, such an ironic ending. Armistice Day, olive branches extended. Wilfred Owen lives on, heartbreaking prose, a war that he fought, so passionately exposed. His poetic legacy, so eloquent and profound, that bloodiest of wars, where heroes did abound. So, you know, he went back to war. He was injured, he was shell-shocked, he had a bit of sort of R&R, and then he goes back, and the reason he goes back is to, I suppose, to win a medal of sorts. And he did that, but he sadly got killed, and a week before the war ended. And obviously his most famous poem is Dulce Decorum Est, Pro Patre More, which basically means, translated, I got it written here actually, it is sweet and filling to die for one's country, which I find is quite a strong sort of legacy to leave. It is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. Is it? I don't know. But you know, he was one of thousands, but he was a poet come soldier, or soldier come poet. But he was a poet first before he was a soldier, and then they just collided.
Yeah,
they just collided. So that's Wilfred. Wilfred Edward Salter Owen. Have you got another one?
Yeah, I mean, I've got one that I wrote for somebody I never knew, which is my great uncle Danny Lane, who fought in the Second World War.
Yeah.
And in the Battle of Monte Cassino.
Oh yeah.
His friend next to him stepped on a landmine, and it went off, and Danny's dog tags were blown off, and they contacted my great grandmother in Penryn Khyber Road, and they said, you know, he's perished, he's gone. And then many months later, he turned up on the doorstep. So he'd been impacted by this explosion. He had amnesia, complete amnesia, couldn't remember anything, but remembered where he lived. And then turned back, and I never knew him. I know my grandfather struggled with the loss of his brother, at the time, and for me it was kind of odd. And whenever the story comes up with Danny, I'm always drawn to think about these poppy fields, these perfect pictures we do of poppy fields now, that it's so peaceful and calm compared to what it would have been like.
Oh.
And so after I'd done the first 3 books, and then Wordcatcher said they wanted to put them together as an omnibus, and we came to the decision of, well, yeah, we'll do that, but I want to put new poems in there, just 6 or 7, just new pieces. And the conversation with Danny had been kicking around for a while, and so I wrote the piece called The Poppy Fields, because I had a very specific image in my head of what a poppy was, and it comes up in the last line of the poem of my, as a writer then, or as a poet, if you like, what I think that poppy is. So yeah, I can give you a read of that if you want.
All right.
So yeah, this is The Poppy Fields. Their petal velvet lips hold tight to scarlet fire, a blood flower, bittersweet, blooming on lime slabs of squat barley meadow, each one a perfect cup of bloodshot lamps, landlocked coral eyes, flushed and flaming, the purest russet dressing of old sod. Each ruddy ornamentation, a fanning bowl and rim, a claret tipple on emerald stem and foot, a rusting cloud sleeping on fur loam. Scattered and sown, left behind the weeping ruby footprints on pastures flat, a glowing crimson mantle of dahlia lament, for the sanguine waters of my father's land, once spilt and dashed to adorn foreign fields with bedizened blush. Through reminiscent fields we walk and gently tread upon the resting, burning teardrops of lost hours. So yeah, that's kind of my. I tried to describe what I saw in that field.
Yeah.
You know, and it was the image for me of that. Again, I think as writers of poetry, we go to odd connections.
Of course you do.
So
you know,
see a poppy as a burning teardrop, which is impossible to burn a teardrop, but that's the kind of image that we go to, isn't it? And then we create something new. So yeah.
And as you know, the poppy, it's basically impossible to kill a poppy.
Mm.
You mean this is why they flower up everywhere? The seeds are everywhere, and that you know, when I was out in France looking at some of the cemeteries and the poppies were coming through, you could see, and you envisage it like in a couple of months when they've actually bloomed. You know, all these white gravestones, perfectly kept, manicured, grass, and then poppies everywhere. You know, it's a beautiful sight, but again, it's a sad sight because it represents the dead.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that was lovely. It is. I think anything as descriptive as that. If people have researched war, that will hit home to them. Now you go back to the younger soldiers in the First World War, and what I try to do when I write a poem is I try to become. If I'm doing about an individual, I try to become that individual. Obviously, Wilfred Owen's a bit different because you can research him and you know the biography of him, so you just get into that. Mm. But I've done a few where, like, I'll read one to you, Shot at Dawn. I thought I'd like to do a poem about one of these young boys, 16 years of age, who's gone to war and actually gets executed by his own people. Mm. And this is what I came up with. I called it Shot at Dawn. I was only 16 when I answered the call. Liberty to fight for, whilst giving my all. It'll be over in months. That's what they said. Like lambs to the slaughter, brave men were led. The Western Front beckoned, I couldn't wait. With rifle and bayonet, not knowing my fate. Fighting was vicious, with no quarter given, slaughter unfolding, unhinging the living. Day after day I saw brave comrades dying, my mind in turmoil, sobbing and crying. Back in the trenches, my whole body shook. With eyes closed I prayed, sleep I forsook. Dawn it was breaking, I couldn't take any more. Under cover of darkness, I left an ungodly war. In a barn I took refuge, daytime nightmares, bodies and carnage I could see everywhere. My freedom short-lived, arrested and shackled, no solace given for a mind not embattled. Court-martialed I was, sentenced to death. In 24 hours, I would draw my last breath. I was left with no hope, blindfolded at dawn. In this war of all wars, we were just mere pawns. I wasn't a coward. My mind had been addled. I was a victim of slaughter I'd witnessed in battle. I didn't feel shame. It was no fault of my own. In my broken mind, I had no need to atone. I went to my Maker, my soul now cleansed, a casualty of war I could not comprehend. So I tried to make that sort of, when he starts, he thinks it's a game. Mm. And when he finishes, he can't comprehend what he's been through. And I put him as a 16-year-old who basically knew nothing about life.
But pieces like that, then, you know, they're like the voices from the past.
Yes.
And I think that it's odd because the first person approach I think is really clever and really really brings it home, because it is like I think when you write about things in the past, sometimes it's easy to write about them and kind of leave them in the past. But when you write about them like you did and with that first person, the voice is talking to you now.
Yes.
And I don't know what the emotional connection is. I don't know whether that takes the reader back then into the war itself, or does it bring the war into the present for the reader? There's an interesting kind of correlation between those two, because one is the impact of a kind of nostalgia, and we are nostalgic as British people about that. I mean, our podcast, we use the Menaholic, don't we, to open all our podcasts, and there's a great British pride. I believe so anyway in our armed forces. I think they're incredible men and women, and the absolute pride of the nation. Thanks to them, we live a very free and good life because of the sacrifices they have made in the past, they're making in the present, and hopefully they don't have to do it again in the future. But when I think about that, I mean that's a beautiful piece, and it's kind of in my head. I'm trying to get my head around it. Did that take me back to the war, or did it bring the war into my present? I don't know. That's
the reason I wrote it. It's like half and half poem, isn't it? You got this young lad going to war, and then you've got him going to heaven, but because he thinks he's going to heaven because he's done nothing wrong. But 40, 50 years later, he's a coward. He's a deserter. All the bloke did, he went from a trench where he was shell shocked and found solace in a barn. And then the following day, off they come, the MPs or whatever, and they drag him off in shackles. And his court martial wasn't 24 hours. It's bump, 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 guilty, shoot him in the morning. And that's what happened, which is a dreadful thing. So he's like, he's one of many who were just forgotten. He's one of the forgotten. You know what I mean? Thankfully, now the ones who have been pardoned, they will be remembered every year. There's a ceremony every year for them, and so it should be. The deserters, because as you know, in the First World War, there are all sorts of blokes joined, criminals, this sort. So it was only natural that their behaviour wouldn't change when they were in a town or whatever it was. People don't think that the First World War was basically soldiers fighting. It wasn't like that, because when they had their R&R, they come from the trenches and they go into a village, and you can imagine them. It's like Nottingham last night. It's the last day of lockdown. We'll all get blotto, and there's hundreds in the street and performing and pushing policemen and taking their helmets off and all that. You know what I mean? The First World War. It's been glorified a lot, but it wasn't. It was a horrendous war. It was, and I wrote one then. I read this one. We spoke last week with Nigel about things that go bump in the night and that type of thing. So I thought I'd write a poem about two brothers. I called it The Spirit of Jack. And this again is written in the first person, and it's a bit of a spiritual poem more than anything. I called it The Spirit of Jack, right? Because if I got many stories in the First World War regarding supernatural happenings, where soldiers say they were saved from death by ghosts and spirits. And it's not a long one. The Spirit of Jack. It was a frosty April night. I needed my sleep on a cold, icy floor in a dugout so deep. Exhausted from battle, respite well earned, curled up in a ball, totally unconcerned. Later aroused, 2 warm hands on my back. I turned my head. It was my brother Jack. I thought I was dreaming. I just couldn't believe. He was killed years ago at the Battle of Ypres. I slowly got up. Jack beckoned with his hand. I followed him closely across no man's land. Shots they rang out. I paid them no heed. I felt indestructible as I followed Jack's lead. Near a bombed out ruin, I saw Jack's shadow vanish. Amongst rubble I fell. I was so full of anguish. Back across no man's land, then to my dread. My dugout a crater. Comrades all dead. I never revealed my experience that night. Did Jack's shadowed spirit really save my life? I'd heard many stories, but never believed of spirits and ghosts overseeing battlefields. So I thought, I tried to incorporate it in an experience of a soldier who's sort of 1 minute he's in a dugout after battle, covering up, and then this tap on the shoulder, and off he goes across no man's land. And they're trying to kill him, and his brother disappears. He falls in the rubble, and then he goes back, and then he finds that all his bricks in the dugout were just blown to bits. So that type of thing, So I try to sort of introduce that as well, rather than sort of straightforward like.
No, it's great. So we're coming sort of to the end now.
Good God, like.
It's been a quick one, hasn't it?
It has, right. Well, it's gone quicker because Russ Garrett's now with us, probably.
That's right. Not dominating, shouting over everyone.
He's big in India now, you know that, don't you?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. He's got a microphone as well now.
No, he's big in India.
So he's got himself a microphone now, so we'll be able to hear him properly. So no, it's great. No, I mean it's. I think it's. I don't think it's uniquely British. The Americans are very, proud of their military as well. But when I look at, I don't think anyone does pomp and circumstance like Brits. And when you see these remembrance marches and things like that, it does fill you with, this pride. This pride of,
You go about the marches, you see what's going on in London with these demonstrations, thousands and thousands of people just crammed in, nothing's done about it, they're there performing. And we cannot allow a disciplined body of men and women who've served in wars to walk to the cenotaph. Because I'm truly, if you told them to self-distance, they'd have their ranks like they did in the military services. They'd listen to you, and they would have that social distancing. They'd walk, they'd give their respects, and then they'd go home. We can't do that. I cannot fathom that out. You can allow thousands of people to protest, no social distancing, but you cannot allow our military to pay the respects to the dead. It's unbelievable. You go on about the Yanks, as you know, their military is sort of second to none with them. They are so well regarded. I suppose if they had a Remembrance Day, you wouldn't have that. They'd be marching. They would be there. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's an odd decision.
But there we are.
But we live in strange times, don't we?
Yeah, and I think that's where these wars are getting lost. That our men, our women gave their lives. So it's sort of like Aberfann's a typical thing. There was no mention of Aberfan.
No.
On the day, the 22nd of October, no mention at all on the Welsh news. And I said to Karen, I am absolutely disgusted with that. Absolutely. And I don't know where we go in. The news media, I don't know what they want. They got 10 minutes of this. I watched in the night. They had 10 minutes of something which is totally irrelevant, and nothing about Aberfan. Unbelievable. Yeah,
it's I don't know. I mean, the media are such a unreliable source of information now. It's I go back to, especially around the news. I remember when the news would give you facts. Now the news seems to want to give you opinions. And opinions are fine, and everyone's allowed their opinion. It's a free world, but you need to have facts to build opinions on.
Of course you do.
So I don't know. I don't know what's happened with all of that. But you're right. We're living in strange times, and I try. I think we spoke about it when we did our Corona episode a few weeks ago. And I think I said then that I just given up watching it. I can't watch it.
No,
if I want information on the virus, the beer bug, I'll go to the government website and I'll read it rather than hear 3 experts talk about it on the news or talk about something they've read on social media. Because a lot of the news is that now. I read this on Twitter. I read that on Twitter.
You got it. It's
and it brings people down.
I watched Mark Drakeswood's news thing at 12:30. I watched that to see if it was opening up a bit. It's the same old dross all the time. Same dross all the time. People who've died, the family. I think myself, you're not telling us anything.
I think everybody needs some clarity and some certainty.
Yeah,
I think that's what we need now, because I think looking at it, I mean, I'm in Cardiff in the Bay here, and it's quiet. It is so quiet. So everyone is obviously obeying the rules, but you need to give them hope. And I think at the moment there's that feeling of, well, what's going to happen after these 2 weeks?
Yeah, I got a funny feeling personally that the Christmas is coming, and I think if there's another lockdown or whatever, I think people will basically say, enough's enough now. We're going to do what we like.
Well, I'm seeing Natalie was showing me some videos online of some of the hair salon owners and the gym owners and people like that, and and people that have been very level-headed for a long time now, but are the people that are starting to go onto social media and say things like, well, enough is enough, because it's like anything, isn't it? I mean, it means this should have been like a military operation. It should have been, this is what our plan is, and we stick to our plan and we deliver our plan, and then this is the outcome. And if something happens, nobody's unreasonable.
No.
Nobody wants to see a loss of life anymore. But you are getting to the time of year now when it is time, like things like celebrations. I mean, we've had Halloween. We're going to have Remembrance Sunday. Guy Fawkes, Christmas is coming up. Normally, this is around the time of year where people start sort of gathering and
uniting.
Which is kind
of happiness and enjoyment. It's all gone.
Old-fashioned ideas like that.
Yeah, it's all gone. It's like as you know, our grandson now, Rowan, he was 2 weeks old when we saw him, and I was like 7 weeks ago. So I don't know when we'll see him next. I don't know what he's going to do with these lockdowns. If he keeps local lockdowns, well, Christmas is out. So there's that. And we never put him in danger, obviously. But I think there's going to come a time where people say, hang on a minute, now we voted you in, and we're going to do what we like.
Well, I just hope that for everyone that is on the radio complaining and on the television complaining and on social media complaining about this, the National Assembly and how it's been run and what it's doing, I just hope that they all remember that the next time there's an election.
Well, exactly. It's like anything else. Your father, my grandfather, they were Labour through and through, right? I don't want to get political, don't get me wrong, but I think it does have a bearing on things that are happening today. They were Labour through and through, socialists, you know what I mean? looked after each other. If I had £5 and you had nothing, you'd have £2 off me. You'd have food. You know that's the way it was in the valleys. Everybody knew everybody. Now you've got this Labour Party. It's split with this Starmer now and this Corbyn business. You know what I mean? And I'm a great believer, right? If you are the top man or top woman in any organisation, and something happens, and you are party to it happening, you fall on your sword. End of. You'll be man enough to say, "Rip, happy days, I'm off." They don't. Our politicians will not do that. None of our politicians will do that unless their backs are really against the wall, where some reporter is going to say, "Mr. Lane, if you don't, tomorrow morning you're going to be splashed over the sun."
I mean, you don't see it happening with a football team or a rugby team, right?
No.
If they do badly, the coach goes.
Yeah, well, of course they do.
Right.
The manager goes. The coach. But not in politics.
No.
You mean, look what they're getting up to. Half these politics, especially the Labour ones, it's unbelievable. The behaviour one is unbelievable. And I think, so, you wouldn't have lived 10, 15, 20 years ago. You'd be gone. But there we are. So we'll have that for another day. Political.
Well, that's a 4 or 5 hour podcast in itself.
We'll have thousands of followers.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll read you.
Oh, go on.
To wrap this up, I'll read you a new piece I've written.
Oh, excellent. What's it about?
It's about the Tomb of the Unknown Warrior.
Oh, I got a poem of that. Yeah.
My mother told me to watch a program, and I watched the program.
Yeah.
And I started writing some notes.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll write this, and I'm quite happy with it as it is. So I'll give you a reading of that.
Lovely.
We'll draw this wonderful hour to a close.
No problem at all, Ross. Carry on, bud.
And I have called the poem Unknown. Remember me standing, for here I lie to honour thousands, drafted here from foreign fields, where once, wrapped in peace, I lay beneath a shabby cross, etched with a mystery scrawled in pencil, but now ornate and resting here amongst the kings. I sleep here, swaddled still in bloodflower's frame, while my brothers, who may also claim my name, still rest interred in lands across the sea, ripped from fields like Somme or Arras, Ypres or Ain, one of them at least. My coffin, once draped in holy flag, is still now, incurate beneath this shining slab. For I, a token here, was once of 4 or maybe 6. But I will hold them here. I will keep them with my bones and share my platform with my brothers, the prodigals of our peace and pride, still sleeping far from home.
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah. You know, even with the Unknown Soldier now, there's controversy about him. Who he was, what he was. Was he black? Was he white? This type of thing. You know what I mean? And I think that's what modern day sort of has done. It's taken the humility away from everything. You know, the body was dug up many years ago, as you know, and he's laid there to rest. And that's how it should be. It's history. It cannot be changed. I don't think it can be changed.
No. For
whatever reason. It was done. If in the future they want to do something else because of ethnicity or BAME, well, fair enough. And then that in 50, 100 years' time can be looked at. But leave things as they are. The Unknown Soldier. It's part of our heritage. Yeah, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But yeah.
Right then, my friend.
Lovely.
We are out of time until we do this again.
Yeah, no problem.
It's been a wonderful spending the hour with you.
Well, I hope whoever watches it enjoys it, and like I say, we try to change the subjects, and you know what I mean. But and I just hope it might perhaps encourage people to write and to research whatever.
Yeah.
Or in this case, obviously, but perhaps it will spark something. I don't know. If it sparks one, it's done its job.
Enough, isn't it? One is enough.
That's all you want.
No, I said I'm just happy such talking to you, mate. So it's fine.
That's right. At least we're still breathing, but
yeah. I mean, I miss Russell. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, Russ. He's probably making ice cream somewhere.
Probably.
He's multi-talented. See.
There's nothing a man can't do.
Yeah, he's multi-talented. He's a good egg, fair play.
Well, I'm sure we'll catch up with him in the next couple of weeks.
I'm sure we will. Well, I will probably tonight. I know.
Right, Mr. Cole. Thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure. And I will speak to you soon.
No problem.
Take care, bud.
Ta-ra, and same to you.
Thank you.